With Armored Core 6 finally being announced, the internet is ablaze with curiosity and longtime fans overwhelmed with excitement. This is a franchise that we haven't seen a new iteration of in 9 years. By the time this game finally releases, it'll have been about 10, and a lot of long-term fans of the franchise, including myself, are very excited about this game. With that in mind, there's already a lot of speculation going around and a lot of discussions about whether or not this will be a Souls-like, because that's primarily what FromSoftware has done in the most recent decade. I'm here to talk about why not only does that not make any sense, but why it just really wouldn't work in the concept of an Armored Core game. So with that being said, let's get into it. And to start, I want to go back to the origin of the rumor that this game was going to be a Souls-like. Now, back before Elden Ring was released, there was a member of the Reset Era forums that goes by the name Red Licorice. He had a chance to participate in a consumer survey for the game, leaked a bunch of screenshots for the game that had watermarks and whatnot, and mentioned that he was able to see a video of both a boss fight as well as traversal of an endgame environment. To quote, "The boss fight looked quite soulsy. The long-range gunfire reminded me of Virtua On. That's my frame of reference. I'm not a mech fan and haven't played any Armored Core games. The player character in the white mech went in closer to a bigger robot boss and fought with an energy or laser sword. This looked Souls style." Now, while his frame of reference isn't that far off because both Virtual On as well as Armored Core released in the late 90s, it is still over 20 years old, so I'm not all that keen on trusting this person to know what is and isn't Armored Core. Looking at some gameplay from Verdict Day, here I'm shooting targets from far away, and then I see an opportunity, I'm going to dash on and swing the sword, get a triple kill taking out some tanks. And this is basically in line with what he described of shooting and then them rushing in to attack with the sword. If we look at some gameplay from 4 Answer, and this is one of the games that was before 5 in Verdict Day, you can see it's very fast-paced. You're constantly shooting, you're going on and swinging the sword, almost like a joust, if you will. And so, while I think it's certainly plausible that they're going to expand on the melee combat and make it less jousty than it used to be, it's really hard to imagine how something's going to suddenly be Souls style. Because when I think of Souls style, I hear the term Souls style, I think slow, methodical boss fights, I think attacks that are going to devastate your health bar, I think a big emphasis on dodging and defensive play. And while some of those things are true in Armored Core is extremely fast-paced. You're always dodging, you're always boosting around, you're always shooting. Unless the target just isn't on your screen, you're shooting. And this is like the opposite of how Souls work. Moving on from there, he said, the field gameplay, the player in the same white mech seemed to be following a couple of players in the distance, maybe co-op, and they were walking, flying close to the ground, maybe through a snowy area towards either a large wall or gate. This seems Soulsy too, the vastness of the architecture, but it wasn't a castle, more like a worn-down metal stone gate or wall. It was quite short. And as somebody that's played Armored Core games, and I'm sure all the other veterans out there watching this can agree, a huge part of Armored Core is just how vast the fields are. Now, given with the older games, for the most part, they were pretty wide and they were pretty empty. There were some rundown buildings here or there. There might be large walls off in the distance. But vastness is not something that's unique specifically to Souls games. I mean, just going back and looking through some of the footage that we had from the older games, there's tons of vastness available. So how exactly does the vastness of the environment suddenly make something seem Soulsy? Moving on from there, the next thing I see a lot of people referring to is the press release that was sent out by Bandai. In the second paragraph, it mentions that they're now introducing groundbreaking gameplay found in the developers' recent action games. And a lot of people are taking this and inferring it as, oh, this means we're going to get Souls-like elements in Armored Core. And frankly, that really doesn't make a lot of sense if you've played an Armored Core game and you've played a Souls game and you understand the differences between them. If we're looking at FromSoft's most recent games, Sekiro and Elden Ring, the way loss works in Sekiro could potentially make sense, how your experience and your gold is different. Perhaps we earn income as we play the game and do missions, and we also scavenge parts, as we saw in the trailer, and maybe on death you drop scavenged parts, which are used to craft things versus buying things. But beyond that, the whole idea behind the permanence of loss doesn't really work all that well in an Armored Core game, because one of the aspects of it is having all these different cores, having all these different weapons. If suddenly we're left to, struggle just to put an AC together, all of a sudden it's not really Armored Core anymore. It's like Struggle Core. Now, what elements would obviously make a ton of sense? Well, looking at the vast open world that we had access to in Elden Ring, something like that would make a ton of sense in Armored Core. Looking at the centralized hub that's so popular across Souls games. Hell yeah, have a helicopter pick us up, it takes us to a base. From there, we can customize our AC, buy and sell weapons. All of that absolutely makes sense. The multiplayer aspect of all the Souls games. I mean, the framework's kind of already there. You can bring UANCs on mission, which are unmanned armored cores. You have NPC armored cores that will invade you on missions. Like, the building blocks are there to be able to like play this co-op with a buddy and potentially have a rival mercenary that invades you, and you potentially get like a bounty or something for killing him. Stuff like that, 100%, it absolutely makes sense for stuff from their previous games, stuff I've just said, to be an Armored Core. But suddenly thinking it's going to be a Souls-like and we're going to, lose all of our resources on death, and there's going to be bonfires respawning enemies, or there's going to be dodge frames, or, super methodical gameplay, that doesn't make sense. Just at a core level, Armored Core is very fast-paced. It is very high action. Souls is very methodical. Those are, they're apples and oranges. You really can't compare them. And I think this is even more so true if we look at the Steam description. The Steam description, I think this is a little bit more accurate. This is what we should be going off of as opposed to the press release, because this is what they're pushing out to all of the public. But here we can see the same language as before, but tweaked a little bit by combining FromSoft's longstanding expertise in mech games and their signature robust gameplay. This will be a new action experience. So what I want to point out here is expertise in mech games. They are making it very clear this is still going to be a mech game. In Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon, players will assemble and pilot their own mech, very much Armored Core, with 3D maneuverability to move freely through three-dimensional fast-paced missions. This is very much Armored Core. Take on difficult challenges and overwhelm your enemies with dynamic movements that make full use of ranged and melee combat. Players can enjoy a variety of actions that can only truly be realized with mechs. Everything that they have described thus far lines up with what we have seen in previous Armored Core games. Now, I certainly think that the movement is going to be cleaned up. It's going to be way tighter than it was back in the past. I think the melee combat, they said they want a bigger emphasis on melee and shields, so I think we're going to be able to literally have like a big guarded shield up as we're rushing down and shooting people and then swapping to an energy sword and going in for a swing. But I wouldn't expect this game to suddenly have like 4-hit R1 combos how we have in Elden Ring or something, because at the end of the day, what I really want to call attention to, and I really want people to keep in mind here, three-dimensional, fast-paced missions. This is absolutely going to play like previous Armored Core games played, where we're jumping all over the place in 3D and we're shooting. And at the end of the day, melee doesn't really work all that well in 3D. Yeah, they're going to expand upon it, but if people are going to go into this expecting the mechs to walk around all slow like this is Mech Warrior or something and get into some weak-ass sword fights, they're going to be disappointed. And ultimately, that is why I wanted to make this video. I am a huge, huge fan of Armored Core. It's probably my second favorite franchise of all time. Even before I started this channel, I had written a guide for Armored Core 5. It was like kind of like my origins of getting started on video game guides, if you will. This is a franchise I hold very near and dear to me. And I don't want people getting excited for this game because they think it's going to be a Souls-like game, and then it comes out and it's not a Souls-like game, and suddenly everyone's upset and they're trashing it because they had false expectations from the start. I want y'all to understand that Armored Core is first and foremost a mech game. In my opinion, it is the pinnacle. It is the most badass of the various mech games and mech franchises out there. It is the king at the top of the castle. But you need to understand that at the end of the day, it is still a mech game. And mech games have a lot of customization. They have very fast gameplay. You're going to get buried in numbers and math and charts and all sorts of nerdy shit that I absolutely love. And it's not going to be a Souls-like. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not everything needs to be a Souls-like. But watch gameplay of Armored Core. Know what you're going to be getting, and don't hype yourself up with false expectations. With that being said, I'm out. Hopefully, this helps set the record straight for a couple of y'all. I'll catch you guys later.